What happens when one careless brag at a party destroys years of trust? I thought I was being funny, proving I was still desirable, but my fiancé didn't laugh. By the next morning, the invitations were useless, the venue was cancelled, and I was left staring at legal papers instead of wedding vows. My name is Isolde Merin, I'm 32, and I ruined my own wedding before it even happened. At my bachelorette party, I thought I was being clever, bragging to my friends that I had one last fling with my ex, Damien. I wanted to look bold, to prove I was still desirable, even though Nathan, my fiancé, had given me everything I asked for. Word spread faster than I expected, and by the time the night was over, Nathan knew. He didn't scream, he didn't argue, he just packed a bag and left. By the next morning, the wedding was cancelled, the venue was gone, and instead of walking down the aisle, I was staring at legal papers with my name on them. The night of my bachelorette party was supposed to be about celebration, about me being the center of attention. My friends had rented out a rooftop bar with balloons, drinks lined up, and music so loud it made my chest vibrate. Marina, my younger sister, handed me a sash that read bride-to-be and a glittery tiara. Everyone cheered when I walked in, and I felt like a queen. It wasn't enough just to be the bride, though. I wanted to remind everyone, especially the girls who secretly envied me, that I still had choices, that Nathan wasn't the only man who ever wanted me. After a few drinks, I grew louder, more reckless. We were sitting around a table, half the group already tipsy, when one of the bridesmaids asked if I was nervous about marriage. Instead of smiling sweetly and saying no, I leaned back and laughed. I told them I wasn't worried because I had already had my last adventure before tying myself down. Their eyes widened, and I felt the rush of power. So I bragged. I told them I had slept with Damien, my ex, one last time. I called it a send-off, like it was some kind of tradition. The table erupted. Some laughed in shock, others gasped. Marina clapped her hands, saying it was iconic, that I was fearless for admitting it. I loved the attention, the way everyone leaned in closer, whispering and giggling. For a moment, I convinced myself I was untouchable. But what I didn't notice was how quickly the story spread. Someone texted someone else, and before the night was over, Nathan knew. I should have thought about that, but I didn't. I was too wrapped up in being the bold bride who wasn't afraid to confess. When I stumbled home later that night, tiara askew, Nathan was waiting. His suitcase was open on the bed, clothes folded neatly inside. My heart dropped, but instead of apologizing, I went on the defensive. I asked why he was packing, pretending not to know. He looked at me, calm and steady, and asked if it was true. I rolled my eyes, telling him it was just a joke, that girls exaggerate at parties. I accused him of being too sensitive, too controlling, for not being able to laugh. I said every bride has secrets, and at least I was honest. The words came out sharp, arrogant, and full of the false confidence I had built all night. Nathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't call me names. He simply zipped his suitcase, carried it to the door, and said the wedding was off. Just like that. No fight, no begging me to explain. He walked out into the night, leaving me standing in my dress with glitter on my face. The next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Texts from bridesmaids asking if the rumor was true. Messages from family demanding answers. Marina kept telling me not to panic, that Nathan would come back once he cooled down. She said men always forgive brides, that I had done nothing worse than tell the truth. Her words were meant to soothe me, but even she looked worried. By noon, the cancellations began. The venue emailed, saying Nathan had called to withdraw. The florist followed, then the caterer. Each message felt like a stone being dropped into my stomach. I tried calling Nathan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself he was being dramatic, that he couldn't really walk away after all the planning, the money, the years we had spent together. I kept saying it out loud like a mantra. He'll come back, he'll calm down, he'll realize I'm worth it. But deep down, I felt the crack running through everything. When Clara, his mother, called me that afternoon, her voice was sharp with fury. She asked how I could humiliate her son like that, how I could brag about betraying him in front of friends. I tried to gaslight her too, saying it wasn't betrayal, it was a joke, but she didn't buy it. She said Nathan deserved better and hung up before I could defend myself further. That night, I sat in the middle of my apartment, decorations from the party still scattered around, invitations stacked in a box by the door. Everything looked ridiculous, like props for a play that would never be performed. Marina told me to stay strong, that I should post something online to show I was unbothered. She said perception was everything. So I did. I uploaded a picture from the party, smiling with my tiara, captioned choosing myself first, but the likes didn't come. The comments weren't flattering. Some asked if the wedding was really off. Others said nothing at all. Silence filled the space where I used to be admired. By the end of that weekend, Nathan had moved out completely. His side of the closet was empty, his toothbrush gone from the bathroom. I walked from room to room in disbelief, still telling myself he would calm down. But each empty space screamed louder than my denial. The bravado from that night, the laughter, the feeling of being powerful, it had vanished. What remained was the image of Nathan's calm face as he walked out with his suitcase, and the crushing knowledge that maybe this time he wouldn't come back. And as I sat staring at the cancelled wedding emails piling up in my inbox, I couldn't escape the truth. One careless brag had destroyed everything I thought was mine. And Nathan wasn't just angry, he was gone. The week after the party felt like I was living inside a storm I had created myself. News of what I had said spread faster than I imagined. Friends who had been at the rooftop bar whispered to others. Screenshots of my smug social media caption circulated. And before long, everyone connected to the wedding seemed to know. I kept telling myself people were overreacting, that it had just been a joke, but the weight of silence from Nathan made the lie harder to believe. Marina tried to keep me calm, insisting Nathan was only sulking. She said I should go out, be seen, prove I wasn't broken. So she dragged me to brunch with some of our mutual friends, hoping to spin the story in my favor. I put on a bright dress and painted on confidence, ready to control the narrative. At the restaurant, the table felt different. Instead of laughter and congratulations, there was stiffness. I dove straight in, saying I wanted to clear the air. I told them I had only exaggerated at the party, that it was just girls being wild, nothing serious. I laughed as if it were all harmless, expecting them to join in. But the responses weren't what I wanted. One friend asked carefully if Nathan had really left. Another said she couldn't imagine telling a story like that about her fiancé. I brushed off their doubts, insisting I was just more honest than most brides. I said at least I wasn't hiding anything. I twisted the story into something bold, framing myself as fearless instead of reckless. Still, the mood stayed flat. Nora, one of Nathan's closest friends, looked at me for a long time and finally said she didn't think Nathan deserved to be mocked like that. Her tone wasn't angry, just disappointed, and it cut deeper than shouting. Later that afternoon, Clara showed up at my apartment. She didn't wait to be invited in. She stood in the doorway, her voice sharp as a blade. She asked how I could humiliate her son in front of his entire social circle. I tried to defend myself, saying Nathan was overreacting, that he was too sensitive. I even accused him of not being fun enough, of taking life too seriously. Clara stared at me with disgust. She said Nathan had been nothing but loyal to me, and I had turned him into a joke. Then she left without another word. That night, I doubled down online. Marina encouraged me to post again, saying I needed to show strength. I uploaded a picture from brunch, smiling wide with a glass of champagne, captioned, "Some people can't handle honesty." I thought it would make me look untouchable. Instead, the silence was deafening. A few people liked it, but most ignored it. And I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Nathan had deactivated all of our shared accounts. The wedding website was gone. The guest list was deleted. The registry disappeared overnight. It was the clearest sign yet that he wasn't bluffing. He was dismantling everything piece by piece, erasing me from plans I had thought were unshakable. Still, I told myself he was just lashing out. that he'd regret acting so quickly. I told Marina he was making a scene to scare me into apologizing. She nodded, but even she looked uneasy. As the days passed, the calls from vendors began. The photographer asked if the date was still valid. The caterer wanted confirmation. Each time I hesitated, stammering excuses, until I realized Nathan had already contacted them. The deposits were gone. The wedding was unraveling in real time, and I had no control. I tried calling Nathan, begging him to meet me, to talk it through. Every attempt went unanswered. The only reply I received was from his lawyer, a short message stating all communication should be directed through their office. My chest tightened as I read it. He wasn't just cancelling a wedding. He was preparing for something bigger. At night, I lay awake replaying my words from the party. I could still hear myself laughing, bragging, acting like I was above consequences. I wanted to believe I could still spin it, but the looks from friends, the fury in Clara's voice, the silence from Nathan, everything told me the narrative was slipping from my grasp. Marina told me to stay strong, to show Nathan I didn't care. But when I looked around my empty apartment, decorations still piled in the corner, cancelled emails filling my inbox, I felt less like a bold bride and more like a fool who had set fire to her own future. And the worst part was knowing that Nathan wasn't shouting or chasing me. He was calm, methodical, and already moving in ways I couldn't see. His silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. The first glimpse of that came when a mutual friend mentioned casually that Nathan had been downtown, seen walking into a lawyer's office with a folder in hand. My blood ran cold. He wasn't waiting for me. He was planning something final. I tried to tell myself it wasn't over, that he was just scaring me, that I could still win him back if I played this right. But deep down, I felt it. The man I thought would always be mine was slipping away, and the world was beginning to take his side. And as I sat alone that night, staring at my phone screen for a message that never came, I realized I had started a game I didn't know how to finish. Nathan wasn't just gone. He was building something behind the silence, and I was about to find out what it was. After hearing that Nathan had been seen at a lawyer's office, panic started to eat away at the little confidence I had left. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that maybe he was just asking questions, maybe venting. But the thought of him actually taking steps against me made my chest feel tight. Marina told me to ignore it, that no man would walk away from everything he had built with me, but her words didn't ease the dread that grew heavier every day. With Nathan gone silent, I turned to Damien, the ex I had so stupidly bragged about at my party. He had always made me feel like I still had options, like I wasn't trapped by routine. If anyone could make me feel powerful again, it was him. I went to the gym cafe where he worked, sliding into a seat like I owned the place. When he spotted me, his smile was casual, too casual, as if I was just another face in the crowd. I asked if we could talk. He sat down, wiping sweat from his brow, and waited. I launched into my story, telling him Nathan had overreacted to what I said, that the wedding was on pause because people couldn't handle a joke. Damien raised an eyebrow, asking if I really told everyone what we had done. I laughed nervously, saying it wasn't a big deal, but to him it was. He leaned back and told me plainly that he wasn't looking to be dragged into drama. He said we had fun once, but he wasn't about to be part of a scandal. His words felt like a slap. I tried to spin it, saying Nathan was too controlling, that I needed freedom, that Damien was proof I still had it. But Damien only shook his head. He said he didn't want complications and walked away, leaving me sitting there with my coffee going cold. I left the gym with my stomach in knots. The man I had used as proof of my boldness didn't even want to be associated with me. I told myself he was scared, that he was weak, but deep down I knew the truth. I was alone. When I got home, I found Clara's message waiting on my phone. She had sent screenshots, pictures of me at the Bachelorette party, holding a glass, laughing too loudly, clearly boasting. The caption someone else had written said it all. She doesn't even care. Clara's message was simple, You humiliated him, and everyone saw it. My hand shook as I deleted it, but the image burned into my mind. I called Marina, desperate for her to reassure me again. She sighed, telling me she hadn't expected things to snowball this badly. She admitted maybe I shouldn't have bragged. Maybe I had pushed too far. Her hesitation felt like betrayal. For the first time, she didn't sound convinced I would win. Meanwhile, Nathan's absence became louder. Mutual friends started avoiding me. When I tried to reach out, they said they didn't want to be caught in the middle. Nora, who had once laughed with me at parties, now said quietly that she was standing with Nathan. The isolation grew. Even at work, whispers followed me. A coworker asked if it was true the wedding had been called off. I snapped at her, saying people should mind their business, but the truth was spreading faster than I could control. One evening, walking downtown, I saw him. Nathan. He was coming out of an office building, dressed neatly, holding a folder under his arm. The sight of him froze me in place. He didn't see me, or if he did, he didn't acknowledge it. He walked calmly to his car, his posture straight, his steps confident. It was like he had already moved into another world where I didn't exist. I went home shaking, staring at the ceiling all night. I tried to convince myself he was bluffing, that no man would go through with something so final. But deep down, I knew better. Nathan wasn't bluffing. He was preparing. I told Marina about seeing him at the lawyer's office. She told me to keep my head high, to act like I didn't care. She said the worst thing I could do was let him see me panic. But my chest ached, and I couldn't stop replaying the sight of his calm face. It wasn't the look of a man in pain. It was the look of a man building something carefully, brick by brick. Damien had abandoned me. Friends were slipping away, and even Marina's support was starting to crack. Nathan, on the other hand, had grown steadier, stronger. The balance was shifting, and I could feel myself losing. And late one night, scrolling through my phone, I saw it. Nathan's profile picture had changed, not to something dramatic, not to a statement, but to a simple photo of him standing with his arm around Clara, both smiling warmly. It wasn't about me anymore. He wasn't trying to make me jealous. He was showing the world he still had family, still had dignity, while I had made myself into a spectacle. The realization hit hard. I had been so busy trying to prove I was untouchable that I hadn't noticed the ground disappearing beneath me. Nathan wasn't coming back. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. And whatever he was planning, it was about to land in my lap like a weight I couldn't escape. I told myself I would find a way to stop him, that I would twist the story again. But as I lay in bed staring at the empty space where his things used to be, I couldn't shake the truth pressing in. Nathan wasn't bluffing. He was closing the door, and this time it would stay shut. My parents thought a family dinner might clear the air. They invited Nathan and me, along with Marina and Clara. I saw it as my chance to pull everyone back to my side. If I could make my parents believe Nathan was being unreasonable, maybe the tide would turn. I rehearsed lines in the mirror before going, telling myself I would look calm, honest, and unfairly punished. When Nathan arrived, he greeted my parents politely, kissed my mother's cheek, shook my father's hand, and even thanked them for inviting him. He looked composed, not broken, not bitter. That calmness unnerved me. I wanted him to look devastated, to look guilty, to give me something I could twist. Instead, he sat across from me at the long dining table, folded his hands, and waited. Dinner started quietly. My father tried to make small talk, asking about work, but the tension was thick. I seized the first opening. I told my parents I hadn't meant to hurt Nathan, that I had only joked at the party, but he had blown everything out of proportion. I leaned into the role of misunderstood bride, insisting I had just wanted to feel free one last time. Marina jumped in, nodding along. She said I was brave to be so honest, that most brides hide their slips, and at least I had been upfront. She turned to Nathan and asked why he couldn't forgive one mistake. I felt a flicker of triumph. This was going the way I wanted. But then Clara spoke. Her voice was calm but sharp, every word like a blade. She asked my parents if they had seen the screenshots. My stomach dropped. She pulled out her phone and laid it on the table. There, in front of everyone, were messages of me bragging about Damien, pictures from the party, comments from guests, confirming what I had said. It wasn't just hearsay, it was proof. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's face went pale. He asked me quietly if it was true. I scrambled for excuses, saying I had been drinking, that it was only words, that Damien meant nothing. I tried to paint myself as the victim of bad timing, saying Nathan was cruel to cancel a wedding over a silly slip. Clara cut me off. She said it wasn't one slip, it was humiliation, and I had made sure everyone saw it. She said Nathan had stayed silent out of dignity, but that silence didn't mean weakness. It meant he was finished with me. I turned to Nathan, hoping he would defend me, or at least soften the blow, but he just sat there, steady, letting Clara speak for him. His silence was louder than any accusation. Marina tried again, saying Damien was irrelevant, that it had been harmless, but even she sounded unsure, her voice thinner than usual. My parents looked at me like they didn't recognize me. My mother whispered that she was ashamed. My father stared at his plate. Then the doorbell rang. My father excused himself, returning with a courier holding a thick envelope. The man asked for me by name and handed it over. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were legal documents, formal notice from Nathan's lawyer. Not only was the wedding cancelled, but Nathan was filing to recover all wedding expenses from me. Venue costs, catering deposits, photographer fees, everything. The total stared up at me in black ink, a number so large it made my chest tighten. I looked around the table, desperate to find someone on my side. Marina's eyes darted away. Clara sat tall with satisfaction. My parents looked stricken. Nathan finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. He said he hadn't wanted it to come to this, but he refused to let me destroy him and walk away laughing. He said he was taking back his dignity, and the law was the only way to do it. I wanted to scream, to accuse him of being petty, of punishing me for one mistake. But the papers in my hands felt heavy, undeniable. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was legal. Nathan stood, thanked my parents for dinner, and left with Clara by his side. The door closed softly, but it sounded final. Marina reached for my hand, but even she looked shaken. My mother asked how I could ever think bragging about betrayal was something to laugh about. I had no answer. I sat at that table, the envelope spread open in front of me, realizing the truth I had refused to see. Nathan wasn't bluffing. He wasn't sulking. He was dismantling me piece by piece, and he was doing it with calm precision I couldn't fight. And as I sat there, cheeks burning under everyone's stares, one thought echoed in my head. I had lost control of the story, and now the story was about to crush me. The days after the family dinner were suffocating. I kept the envelope on my coffee table, unopened after that first awful night. Every time I passed by, the legal stamps and Nathan's lawyer's letterhead seemed to mock me. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that papers could be shredded, that he was only trying to scare me. But the silence from him said otherwise. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't come to argue. He let the documents speak for him, and that silence cut deeper than any screaming match ever could. I tried to rally support, calling Marina first. She told me to stay calm, that Nathan was bluffing, but her voice was thinner than before, no longer sure. When I asked if she would testify that I was just joking at the party, she hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Even my sister couldn't keep pretending this was harmless. Desperate, I turned to Damien. I found him outside the gym, leaning against his car. I asked him to at least say it wasn't serious, that it had only been one time, that Nathan was overreacting. Damien scoffed. He said he didn't owe me anything, that I had been reckless enough to drag his name into it. He told me plainly that he wanted no part of my mess. His dismissal left me standing in the parking lot, feeling smaller than I ever had. Meanwhile, Nathan's preparations grew clearer. Notices started arriving. Accounts closed, deposits cancelled, vendors contacting me about balances due. I tried explaining to the florist that it wasn't my responsibility anymore, but she said my name was on the contract. Each bill, each notice was another reminder that Nathan was pulling out with clean hands while I was left drowning in costs. I tried to fight socially, telling friends Nathan was being cruel, that he was punishing me for a slip. I framed myself as a woman unfairly judged for one night of honesty, but their responses chilled me. One said gently that Nathan had every right to protect himself. Another told me she couldn't be involved. Even Nora, who used to laugh at my boldness, told me she was done defending me. My circle was shrinking fast, and with it, the story I had built was collapsing. At home, the silence pressed in. My parents barely called. When they did, their tone was heavy with disappointment. My mother asked if I realized what I had thrown away. My father said quietly that Nathan was right to protect himself. Clara, on the other hand, was loud and clear, posting pictures of her son smiling, writing captions about strength, dignity, and truth. Every post felt like another nail in the coffin of my reputation. Then came the final blow. Nathan's announcement. A photo appeared online. Nathan standing beside a woman I hadn't seen before, her hand resting lightly on his chest, a simple caption underneath, moving forward. No gloating, no insults, just calm certainty. The sight of it made my stomach twist. He wasn't waiting for me. He wasn't broken. He had already stepped into a new life. I stared at the picture until my hands shook. Marina called after seeing it, but even she sounded deflated. She murmured that maybe I had underestimated him. She didn't tell me I was strong anymore. She didn't call me brave. She just told me I needed to face what was coming. The humiliation spread quickly. People who once asked me about wedding plans now congratulated Nathan for his strength. Friends who once cheered my boldness now avoided eye contact. At work, whispers followed me down the hall. I became the punchline of my own story, and there was no way to spin it anymore. When another thick envelope arrived, this time an itemized list of wedding expenses Nathan's lawyer intended to recover, I nearly collapsed. The number at the bottom made my head spin. Venue, catering, photography, flowers, dresses, everything totaled into a debt I couldn't fathom paying. My first instinct was to call Nathan, to beg him to reconsider. But the letter was clear. All correspondence must go through legal counsel. There was no path to him anymore. I sat at my kitchen table that night, papers spread around me, my phone dark and silent. The tiara from my party sat abandoned in a drawer, the invitation still boxed by the door, useless relics of a life I had burned to ash. I thought about the way Nathan had walked out that first night, calm, suitcase in hand. At the time, I thought he was bluffing, but now I saw it for what it was. The beginning of his escape, clean and deliberate. Damien was gone. My friends had stepped back. My family no longer shielded me. And Nathan had rebuilt himself into someone admired, someone dignified, someone untouchable. I wanted to believe there was still a way to twist the story, to paint myself as misunderstood. But every time I looked at the papers in front of me, I knew the truth. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was law, and law doesn't bend to excuses. The last sliver of denial slipped away as I realized what Nathan had done. He hadn't yelled, hadn't sought revenge in public humiliation. He had simply gathered the facts, gone through the proper channels, and left me holding the wreckage. And the wreckage was mine alone. The courthouse smelled of old paper and polished wood. I sat on one side of the room with my lawyer, my hands trembling in my lap. Across the aisle, Nathan sat straight-backed beside his attorney, calm as ever. He didn't glance at me. His eyes were fixed forward, his face unreadable, like I was nothing more than another case on the docket. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Nathan's lawyer spoke first, presenting everything in neat order. Deposit receipts for the venue, catering contracts, florist's bills, photographer retainers. Each one bore my signature, each one proof that I was financially responsible. My stomach twisted as the numbers added up. Then came the screenshots, pictures of me at the Bachelorette party, laughing with a drink in my hand, the captions bragging about Damien. My own words, my own smirk, now used as evidence of why Nathan had cancelled the wedding. When it was my lawyer's turn, he tried to argue that the cost should be shared, that Nathan had chosen to cancel in anger, that I had been joking at the party. I nodded desperately, clinging to the story that had carried me this far. But the judge's face didn't soften. He looked at me like someone who had heard every excuse before. Then Nathan rose to speak. His voice was calm, steady, even kind. He said he wasn't seeking revenge. He said he had been humiliated, but he refused to fight dirty. He wanted only fairness, that I take responsibility for the expenses my actions had caused. He didn't insult me. He didn't even mention Damien by name. He spoke with dignity, the kind of dignity I had thrown away. Hearing him broke something inside me. I had expected rage, accusations, maybe even tears, but there was none of that. Just quiet strength, the kind that made me realize I had already lost before I even walked into the courtroom. The judge delivered the ruling swiftly. I was held responsible for the costs, all of them. The total was staggering, more than I could imagine paying. My ears rang as the words sank in. Nathan would walk away free, debts cleared, dignity intact. I would walk away in ruins. As the session ended, I stayed frozen in my chair while Nathan gathered his papers. Clara appeared at his side, her hand on his shoulder, her face glowing with pride. Nathan's lawyer shook his hand, congratulating him. He nodded, calm, collected, the picture of a man who had taken back control without raising his voice. I finally forced myself to stand, my legs weak, clutching the documents that spelled out my defeat. As I turned, I caught sight of Nathan again. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no anger, no longing, not even pity, just finality. Then he turned away, walking out with Clara, his lawyer, and a future that no longer had anything to do with me. The hallway outside buzzed with people waiting for their cases. I felt their eyes on me, though no one said a word. I clutched the papers to my chest and hurried out into the bright sunlight. The world looked the same, but everything in my life had collapsed. At home, I dropped the envelope on the table and stared at it. The words blurred through my tears, but the numbers didn't change. Debt, responsibility, finality. Marina called, her voice tentative. She asked what had happened, and when I told her, she sighed. For the first time, she didn't defend me. She said quietly that maybe it was time I faced what I had done. Hearing that from her, my biggest supporter, felt like the last thread snapping. I wandered the apartment, each empty space screaming at me. The closet where Nathan's clothes had hung. The bathroom counter where his toothbrush used to sit. The drawer where our wedding invitations still lay unused. Everything felt hollow. I picked up the tiara from my bachelorette party, glitter still clinging to it, and I wanted to throw it across the room. Instead, I set it down gently. Even in my anger, I couldn't escape the truth. I had done this to myself. I thought about Damien, who had vanished the moment things got serious, about Marina, who no longer sounded sure of me, about my parents, whose disappointment weighed heavier than silence, and about Nathan, whose calmness had been his greatest weapon. He hadn't needed to scream or shame me. He had simply walked away with the law on his side, leaving me exposed. The cruelest part wasn't the debt or the humiliation. It was the way he carried himself, steady, dignified, untouched. While I sat surrounded by the ruins of what could have been, Nathan walked free, admired by friends, supported by family, ready to rebuild without me. I had thought bragging about Damien would make me powerful, daring, unforgettable. Instead, it made me a cautionary tale. My attempt at boldness became the noose around my neck, tightening until there was nothing left but the sound of doors closing. And as I sat in the silence of that apartment, the documents spread across the table, I realized the final truth. Nathan hadn't just cancelled the wedding. He had erased me from his life with clean, lawful precision, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching. watching.